Let me start with the bad news. You cannot learn how to smoke a perfect Texas-style brisket from watching a YouTube video. There is too much information to take in, a lot of it is impossibly contextual, and the meta strategy continues to change. So there's no point in making nor watching this video, right? Well, here's my target outcome. I want this to be the best video for aspiring pitmasters to watch first before they try to learn the infinite number of ways there are to smoke beef. I'm going to touch on each major step, explain why that step is complicated, and then show you what I do personally. Take this for example. Step 1 is deciding how perfectly you are trying to cook your brisket. Why is this complicated? The parameters for competition barbecue, restaurant barbecue, and backyard barbecue for your family and friends are all significantly different. This becomes apparent anytime you see someone bragging about their fall off the bone ribs on Instagram, only for the top comment to be like, "Actually, Chief, you don't want them to be that tender." Also, brisket used to be a dirt cheap cut of beef that, as long as it was cooked till tender, was indisputably sensational. But these days, chefs have reached such astronomical levels of barbecue gastronomy that some home cooks demand brisket that's not just good, but transcendently good. That's why step 1 is deciding how good you want it to be. For a beginner, I think you just want it to be properly seasoned, not tough nor chewy, and not so soft that it feels like you wasted a bunch of effort on something texturally comparable to a standard crock-pot braise. The next major step is buying the brisket. This is a massive determinant of the final product. In the same way that chicken breast is harder to nail than chicken thigh, a USDA select grade packer is going to be much harder to cook properly than a well-marbled prime or even Wagyu brisket. The purchasing stage is the one at which you need to understand the difference between the point and the flat, two names for the two main muscles of the brisket, also called the fatty and the lean, respectively. If you can't look at a vacuum-sealed hunk of beef and say, okay, this one has too much lean meat or too much fatty meat for my tastes, I don't think that you are prepared to move forward on this journey yet. You need to know what you're looking for. Unlike chicken, which I'm happy to buy at a regular grocery store, barbecue meats like pork ribs and beef brisket are the ones I prefer not to chintz on. I get mine from Porter Road, but I'm a fancy-dancy influencer who gets discounted meats in exchange for affiliate links. I'm not suggesting that you have to buy brisket where I get mine, but the folks who are serious about barbecue have a trusted supplier like Snake River Farms, who can provide something that's much better than average grocery store meat, even if it's as simple as, oh, the Costco by me sells USDA prime for a pretty good price. That's good too. The point is that discovering how and where to buy brisket is an important part of the learning process. You'll notice that I am now on the third major complicated step of the journey, and I haven't even started to cook yet, but you've got to consider which smoker you will be using. 20 years ago, Wi-Fi enabled electronic pellet smokers weren't even a thing. The barbecue meta is always shifting. Obviously, you're going to use whatever you have, which is fine for smoking, a cooking style that can be done inside of an oil drum, a Weber kettle, or a file cabinet. But just know that when you end up researching things like fire management and smoke adhesion and brisket size, they'll be informed by your specific cooking vessel. I'm a first-time father of a toddler. Obviously, I'm using this Yoder instead of a log-fed offset smoker. I want to sleep while I can, not tend to a fire all night. I am aware of the downsides. Pellet smokers are much worse at developing a smoky bark. But because I know that, I will do what I can to offset it. There will be more on that later. As with all consumer products, you will find petabytes of video content and forum discussion over each individual option. The big, main, important factor is whether your chosen tool, under your care, can create an environment conducive to smoked meats. That means holding a steady temperature while clean, barely visible so-called blue smoke wisps out of the vents. Okay, finally, trimming. This part probably gives most people the most anxiety. I will tell you what you shouldn't do. You shouldn't think, heck, I paid for all this meat, I'm gonna use it all, not trim half of the value away. Trimming the meat is not wasting it. Keeping too much on is wasting it. If you leave the thin slivers of meat on the brisket, those parts are going to dry out and burn. It's better to cut them off now and freeze them for later use as burger meat or braise fodder. Otherwise, the thin bits will get ruined. Similarly, I get why you would think that you want to leave big hunks of fat on it. You think fat is flavor, so if I leave some extra on the cap, this thing is going to be moist, and if it turns out to be too much, I can just cut off any excess fat as I eat it. Understand that the smoke isn't going to penetrate into the meat on parts that have an overly thick fat cap. Your goal is to have no single layer of fat that's any thicker than a number 2 pencil on top of the meat. There will be areas that you go too deep, accidentally trimming too much fat and revealing the red flesh underneath. There will be areas that you under-trim. Everybody makes mistakes, even the professionals who post really impressive trimming demonstrations. But my main tip during this phase is that it's far better to trim a little bit too much than it is to under-trim. This is another reason why I go with high-end meat suppliers. The price per pound is higher, but they tend to do a lot of the trimming for me, so I'm not paying for 5 pounds of fat. There's usually a big, massive lump of hard, unrenderable fat running down this whole area, so having that taken out for me leads to a better final product. My advice to a beginner is to thumb through the hundreds of brisket trimming videos on this website and try to find one that looks like your particular brisket. They are all different shapes and sizes with significant idiosyncrasies, so there's no way you can watch one video about trimming and say, okay, I know exactly what to do with mine. Next, seasoning. The unnecessary mysticism you will find from hardcore Texaboos at this stage is that you should only use salt and pepper. Ignore that. Some of the top pitmasters will use a commercially available spice blend like Lowry's or Seasonal and then still go out and say, oh, it's just salt and pepper in my rub because, well, technically this is just seasoned salt. When some folks insist that you cannot and shall not use anything outside of salt and pepper, they are being obtuse and holding you back. I do 2 parts by volume, coarsely ground pepper, 1 part kosher salt, and 1 part finely ground salty seasoning like Lowry's, or in today's case, Goya Sazon. I like the color that it brings and the fact that it's mostly MSG for good depth. Anything with onion and garlic in it will be a fine choice. The salt is important for contributing salinity, but the coarse black pepper is in fact the major player. Do not be afraid of lots of black pepper. Its spiciness will mellow out over its long-term cook, and the irregular grind shape holds on to smoke, building a nicer bark than fine ground pepper would. One thing I personally find weird is how often people online will use packaged pre-ground pepper. If we're going to regard pepper as a defining factor of Texas-style barbecue, don't you want it to be performing at its peak? I don't use pre-ground pepper for day-to-day cooking, much less for a Texas-style brisket. I am nowhere near a brisket ideologue, but I do find that to be wholly unserious. The last note that I will hit at this point is that the type of wood you use should be treated as a type of seasoning. I've used pellet blends with fruit wood in it that make the whole brisket taste like a hot dog. I would love to use post oak for the flavor that's exactly what I'm used to back home, but it's hard to find pure post oak in pellet form. This oak pellet blend will work this time for this pellet grill. Do not underestimate the importance of your choice. So, I purchased a brisket, trimmed it, seasoned it, put it on a wire rack, and I want to let it sit in the fridge for 24 hours so the salt has a chance to penetrate as deeply as it can for a hunk of beef this large. I have tried skipping that step, but the inner meat usually comes out bland. So, 24 to 36 hours later, finally, it is time to cook this thing. When someone asks, how do I smoke a brisket? This is usually what they think step 1 will be. What temp and for how long? And this is where it becomes most clear that there will never be a video explaining the answer. I cannot tell you how to smoke a brisket because you are one person with specific constraints and your brisket is a unique snowflake. I can, however, show you what I do. The night before I want to have a brisket dinner, I set this pellet grill to 200 degrees. Around 10 p.m., I put the meat on the top rack, fat side up, right before I go to bed. This isn't entirely necessary, but I also put a baking dish under it. I add all of the fat from my trim job into the baking dish along with a half gallon of water. I figure the smoker is going to be running anyway, so I might as well render some smoked tallow while it works. The baking dish is going to act as a heat shield from the fire pot right underneath it. The water inside is going to help render the fat into liquid tallow, and the evaporating steam from that water will help schwitz the brisket so I don't have to come spritz it every couple hours. I insert a probe into the center of the beef, make double darn sure that the hopper's full of pellets, and then sleep for 9 to 10 hours, knowing that there's no way this will overcook in that amount of time. For my specific setup and my personal lifestyle, this approach is a win-win-win-win-win-win-win. The timing makes it possible for me to plan for a brisket dinner at 7 or 8, not a ravenous, hangry brisket feast at midnight. The next morning when I wake up, I check in on things to make sure a good bark has developed, and then I crank the heat to 275. That whole first step was just to build bark. Remember, pellet grills are bad at that, but 10 hours of low heat smoke helps to get a good one going. Now the actual cooking begins, and I won't do anything else until the internal temp hits about 170. At that point, I will wrap the whole thing in butcher paper, douse it in rendered beef tallow, and return the wrapped meat to the smoker to cook with the probe in it. Okay, you say, but how long will that next part usually take? The thing is, you never know. The calculations people throw out there like 1 hour per pound of meat aren't accurate. You just have to wait until the probe starts to read 190 to 200 before you even think about calling it done, and then You use a thermometer every 15 minutes to test for tenderness. Write this down. You don't smoke brisket according to time. You don't smoke brisket according to temperature. You smoke brisket according to tenderness. I'll link a video that explains in detail why temperature isn't the determining factor, but the thing you need to understand, the thing that trips up good cooks who learned how to cook based on time and temp, is that you know it's done when it feels right. Others have aptly described the ideal probing sensation as sticking the tip into a jar of peanut butter. And that's just another reason why you have to learn from practice, not from a video. It's done when it feels like there's almost no resistance. Let's say mine finishes at 1 p.m. I'll take it out, park it in a cooler or a 150-degree oven to rest, and then just leave it there until dinner at 7, knowing that the hard part is over. I know it's going to be properly seasoned because I coated it in as much salt and pepper as it can hold. I know it's going to be smoky enough because I got visual confirmation of a dark bark. And I know it's not tough nor chewy because I probed it for tenderness all over. I just need to let it rest and keep warm for 3 or more hours until it's time to serve. That's the whole process. I imagine the beginners took that in and feel prepared. But those of us who have made several briskets understand that I just breezed past a couple dozen really important choices just now. Why do you like butcher paper more than foil boat? Foil boat is the popular method right now. It yields superior bark, but I don't like how tender the flat gets. Why wrap up the brisket at all? To speed up cooking, of course. Okay, but you're slow smoking barbecue, so what's your hurry? Fair question, but long cook times still have risks. I don't want a large portion to dry out while I get the internal texture right. Why place it fat side up? Does it help the fat baste the meat as it drips down? I don't know. So why not place it fat side down? Surely that will render fat even better because the heat from a pellet grill comes from the bottom. Okay, you know what? I will try it next time. I am listing all these questions not to give you anxiety, but to express how even if you followed my approach perfectly, you aren't done learning. Barbecue is a skill that you develop each time you try. Just about every time you cook a brisket, you will notice something that you'd like to change next time. That's why people like to keep a journal so that they can reference their notes 3 months later, and it's also why the playhead of this video isn't quite as close to the end of the timeline as you might have expected. There is still much to address. For example, you gotta learn how to slice this thing. It's pretty straightforward for the first half, but remember, this is made out of 2 distinct muscle groups. You cut regular vertical slices at the flat, make these about as thick as a pencil, but once you get around here, you'll see the slices have started to show the flat muscle on the bottom with a layer of the point muscle on top. This is where you want to rotate the whole thing 90 degrees and then slice it in a perpendicular direction. That's going to make sure that you are slicing against the grain for maximum tenderness. You can make these slices thicker and you'll notice a nice honeycomb pattern where the point meat is just barely holding together. If you're having friends over, you offer these slices to the people who prefer lean and these slices to people who like it fatty. You don't want to serve it to guests and then do the annoying thing where you apologize all night and insist that you can do better. That never makes for a good dinner party. Just take notes on what you did and didn't like. I always take note of the final cook time and temps, plus personal notes. If you wanted some better metrics beyond did you like it, take a 1/4-inch slice of lean brisket and drape it over your finger. Does it bend and flop as one piece, or does it fall apart? When you bounce it up and down, can you make it clap at the edges? Take a piece of the most central part of the meat. Was everything appropriately seasoned? I remember on this one, I was upset by an under-trimmed section where the smoke ring couldn't develop underneath all that fat. The note-taking part of brisket smoking is important for normal folks like you and I who only make 1 or 2 of these per year. There's no way you're gonna remember everything next time. I wanna make one last counter-argument against my original thesis statement. What if I took this video and expanded it into a 5-hour-long course that included every possible variable and how to achieve the best results according to those variables? What if viewers then watched it and they bought exactly what I bought, they did exactly what I did, and then they loved the results with no noted improvements for the next time? That would theoretically be the video that teaches someone how to smoke a brisket perfectly, right? I gotta say, for as much as I hate phrases like the secret ingredient or the secret trick or the key to perfection in cooking instruction, this is a space in which arcane knowledge does exist. There are, in fact, legitimate barbecue secrets that, when revealed, catapult home barbecue miles ahead in quality and reliability. I remember watching Jeremy Yoder posting about how Aaron Franklin puts beef tallow on their brisket while wrapping, and not a small amount. They add so much of it that a punctured paper can spew fat like Texas tea from a lucky excavation. That technique is now so ubiquitous that it's easy to forget that just a few years ago, we didn't even know how impactful it could be. I talked about the foil boat method earlier, and that's a relatively new middle ground relationship between a butcher paper wrap and a Texas crutch, which is wrapping the whole thing in foil. Even in that hypothetical scenario in which someone puts all the public barbecue knowledge into one video, it will not be a perfect video in perpetuity. For now, I think my advice is valuable. Buy the highest quality beef that you can afford, trim it judiciously, and then smoke it according not to temp nor time, but to tenderness. I do have a couple small notes that didn't have a natural inclusion point. One, I don't blame anybody who is too scared to try to smoke a whole brisket. Sometimes you can find a half brisket that includes either just the flat or just the half with the flat and the point, and that's a nice entry point because it's much cheaper and it cooks much more quickly. Two, I find beef ribs to be too fatty to enjoy regularly, but you can learn a lot of the same lessons by cooking the ones labeled dino ribs. They don't need to be trimmed, they don't need to be wrapped, and they're so well marbled all the way through that you really don't have to worry about them drying out. You might find those perfect for a practice round. 3. Those first fresh slices of brisket are all about reveling in the beauty of what you've achieved, but 2 days in a row of salty, fatty meat can feel like a drag. Serve your brisket fresh on day one with all the white bread and side dishes, but brighten things up for the leftovers. I gently reheat cubes of brisket and then serve them over rice with pomegranate, bell peppers, cashews, cucumber, tomato, and onion, sort of like a barbecue version of halal cart bowls. I didn't really know where to insert those 3 hot tips, but the original thesis stands. You can watch hours of expert instruction on YouTube, but you can never predict what your next one might teach you. It's a bit like having a baby in that way. The fact that each one will teach you something might be enough to make you want to make one. Economic outlook be damned. Good luck. Trade has paid to be mentioned at the end of this video. A bit of inside baseball for you. I get a free bag to show you on camera for this ad read, but I still do personally subscribe to Trade with my own money for my own delivery of whole bean medium roast espresso every 14 days. One thing worth mentioning at this time of year is that a Trade subscription also makes quite the gift. Whether the recipient drinks specialty espresso beverages, cold brew, or filter drip black, Trade is going to provide them with freshly roasted, freshly ground, or whole bean coffee at a fair price. They take the offerings from over 50 roasters across the US, and then they send you the good stuff that you are guaranteed to like according to a taste-based quiz that you can take before ordering the first bag. If you don't like what you get, Trade will replace it for free until you do. Right now, Trade is offering 50% off a 1-month trial at drinktrade.com/Shaquille and 10% off gifts. That's drinktrade.com/Shaquille to get 50% off a 1-month trial and 10% off gifts. drinktrade.com/Shaquille. There's a clickable link down in the description if you don't want to type that all out.